April 6th, 1933, something unimaginable happened in the United States. Millions of Americans opened their eyes as law-abiding citizens, and by nightfall, they were criminals. Not because they robbed a bank, not because they forged documents, but because they owned gold. Yesterday, it was a symbol of security, a sacred right passed through generations. Today, under President Franklin Roosevelt's signature, that same gold became contraband, punishable by 10 years in prison. Overnight, the US government redefined wealth, rewrote the rules, and launched the largest forced financial seizure in American history. And the most disturbing part, Americans didn't fight it. They surrendered, willingly, by the millions. In the next few minutes, we uncover how the government convinced an entire nation to hand over 3,600 tons of pure gold, and why almost no one realized they were being deceived. To understand how an entire nation could be stripped of its wealth in broad daylight, we need to return to 1933, the darkest year of the Great Depression. America was not simply in crisis, it was breaking. Banks collapsed every single day. Factories shut down, farms were abandoned, bread lines stretched across entire city blocks. Millions had lost their savings. Millions more had lost their homes. And for the first time, ordinary Americans wondered whether the United States, the symbol of prosperity, might not survive. Fear wasn't just present, it ruled. And in moments like this, people cling to whatever seems unshakable. For Americans in 1933, that anchor was gold. Gold coins hidden in kitchen jars, gold bars passed down from father to son, gold certificates tucked inside family Bibles. Gold was trust. Gold was safety. Gold was the only thing that didn't lie. But in the White House, President Franklin Delano Roosevelt stared at this gold with a very different understanding. Where the average citizen saw protection, Roosevelt saw a threat to his ability to save the economy. You see, gold wasn't just a shiny metal. Under the gold standard, every dollar in circulation had to be backed by a precise amount of gold in the treasury. If gold flowed out of the system, the entire financial foundation of America cracked, and that was exactly what was happening. Terrified citizens were demanding gold withdrawals faster than the government could supply it. Banks were bleeding reserves. The Federal Reserve's vaults were shrinking by the day. If the gold vanished, the dollar would collapse, and with it, the entire American economy. Roosevelt understood a brutal truth. If he wanted to save the system, he had to break it first. And that meant taking gold not from criminals, but from ordinary Americans. This was the beginning of a plan no president had dared attempt before. A plan that would turn wealth into contraband. April 5th, 1933. Roosevelt had been in office barely a month. The crisis was at its peak. Banks were collapsing, faith was dying, and gold was flooding out of the system like water through broken glass. That morning, Roosevelt lit a cigarette, leaned over his desk, and signed a single document that would change American life forever. Executive Order 6102. A bland title hiding a brutal truth. Officially, forbidding the hoarding of gold coin, gold bullion, and gold certificates within the continental United States. But the real meaning was far simpler and far harsher. Turn in your gold, or go to prison. The order gave Americans 25 days, less than a month, to surrender every ounce of gold they possessed. Family coins, inherited bars, private savings, company reserves, everything. The exceptions were tiny and almost mocking. Jewelry, dental gold, a few rare collectible coins, small industrial quantities. Everything else, confiscated. The price was fixed at $20.67 per ounce. No negotiation, no appeal, no market value considered. The government announced, "We are buying your gold at this price. You have no choice." And the punishment for disobedience? A $10,000 fine, 6 years of the average American salary, or 10 years in prison, more than some violent criminals received, or both. Roosevelt understood something that every ruler in history has exploited. People don't resist when you threaten them. They resist when they feel alone. So he made sure no one felt alone. A nationwide propaganda campaign began. Newspapers published stories claiming that gold hoarders were sabotaging America. Radio stations warned that refusing the order was unpatriotic. Banks hung posters reading, "Surrender your gold, save the nation. Your duty is to America." Suddenly, keeping your own money was portrayed as betrayal, and resisting the government meant endangering millions. Fear did the rest. Most Americans didn't feel robbed. They felt obligated, even morally responsible, to obey. This was the brilliance of the plan. Roosevelt didn't need to take the gold. He convinced the public to hand it over willingly. By May 1st, 1933, the final day to surrender gold, lines in front of banks stretched for blocks. Americans brought everything they had: family coins saved for generations, gold bars inherited from the gold rush. The last remaining savings meant to secure a decent old age. Instead of real, tangible wealth, they received paper bills that were already losing value. The government collected almost 3 million ounces of gold from private individuals, about $118 million at the time, nearly $10 billion today. And this didn't include the gold surrendered by corporations, banks, or institutions. In total, the government seized 3,673 tons of gold from the economy. If this level of government betrayal shocks you, hit like and subscribe. There are plenty more remarkable stories on the way. But the most cynical part of the story was still ahead, because on January 30th, 1934, less than a year after the confiscation, Roosevelt signed the Gold Reserve Act. And overnight, the price of gold was raised from $20.67 to $35 per ounce, a 69% increase. Simple arithmetic. Americans surrendered gold at $20.67. A few months later, that same gold was worth $35. On the confiscated gold alone, the government earned approximately $2.8 billion, when the entire federal budget that year was $6 billion. In other words, almost half of all government spending in 1934 was financed by the forced surrender of citizens' gold. Americans who believed they were saving the nation watched in shock as the gold they gave up for patriotic reasons suddenly generated enormous profits, but not for them. They were left with paper money rapidly losing value. The government walked away with billions in newly created wealth. And for many, this moment revealed the harsh truth. They hadn't rescued the economy. They had been used to rebuild it at their own expense. Of course, not all Americans quietly accepted what happened. Some refused to surrender their gold. Some hid it in basements, behind walls and under floorboards. Others believed the order was unconstitutional and decided to fight. The most famous case involved Frederick Barber Campbell, a wealthy businessman from San Francisco. Campbell owned over $200,000 worth of gold bars, a fortune at the time, and he categorically refused to hand them over to the government. He hired the best lawyers, filed lawsuits, and claimed that Executive Order 6102 violated the Fifth Amendment, which protects citizens from the seizure of private property without just compensation. For a time, it seemed he might win. The case moved through the courts until 1935, when the Supreme Court issued a ruling in the case Norman versus Baltimore and Ohio Railroad. The court declared that Congress had the constitutional authority to regulate the value of money, and that gold clauses in contracts were invalid. In simple terms, the highest court in the country officially legalized what had happened. The government had the right to change the value of money. The government had the right to seize gold. And the government had the right to punish anyone who disagreed. Campbell lost his case. During one of the hearings, overwhelmed and devastated, he suffered a heart attack and collapsed in the courtroom. He survived, but his defeat sent a message to the entire nation. Resistance was futile. Over the next 3 years, thousands of criminal investigations were launched. The FBI tracked suspicious transactions. Banks were required to report anyone attempting to hide gold. Informants became a daily reality. Most cases resulted in heavy fines, ruined fortunes, or prison sentences. By now, the US government had accumulated such an enormous amount of gold that it needed a place to store it, not just securely, but almost militarily. So in 1936, construction began on a new federal depository in Kentucky, Fort Knox. The structure was built like a fortress, walls over a meter thick, reinforced concrete, steel plates, a 20-ton vault door, and a locking mechanism so complex that no single person knew the entire combination. Around it, minefields, armed guards, and security systems far ahead of their time. By 1941, Fort Knox held more than 650 million ounces of gold, more than half of America's total reserves. Gold that, just a few years earlier, had belonged to ordinary American families. But the question remains, did all of this actually save the American economy? Economists still argue about it today. Some believe Roosevelt's policy helped stabilize the financial system and accelerated recovery from the Great Depression. Others insist it was an immoral violation of private property, a betrayal of trust that permanently damaged the relationship between the government and its citizens. What no one denies is the scale of the change. Because from that moment on, the United States would never be the same. The gold standard, the system that guaranteed every dollar was backed by real, physical gold, was effectively dead. The link between money and tangible value had been severed. From now on, the government could print money without needing gold to support it, and that power would grow. In 1971, President Richard Nixon ended the dollar's convertibility into gold entirely. From that day forward, US currency became what it is today, fiat money, backed not by metal, but by trust. Trust in a government that had once confiscated gold from its own people. As for the gold itself, it still sits in Fort Knox and other government vaults. Officially, the United States holds 8,133 tons of gold, the largest reserve in the world. Unofficially, no one knows for certain. The last public audit was in 1974. Since then, the vaults have remained sealed. No independent investigator has been allowed inside. Some believe the gold is untouched. Others believe it has quietly moved, sold, or leveraged in ways never disclosed to the public. What is certain is this: a government that once deceived an entire nation out of 3,600 tons of gold has never again fully revealed what happened to it, and perhaps never will. Whether Roosevelt's actions were heroic or hypocritical, necessary or criminal, remains a debate that divides historians, economists, and citizens to this day. But one fact is undeniable. In 1933, Americans believed they were helping save their country. Instead, they witnessed one of the largest transfers of wealth in modern history, a transfer orchestrated not by thieves in the night, but by the very government sworn to protect them.